What grossed you out so much in a relationship that you just left? He bragged about how he Wally abused the family dog when he was a teenager, about how he groomed his high school girlfriends just to cheat on them. Yet I was still shocked when he did the same thing to me. He's a Reddit user and I fucking hope he sees this. My sister was like this. She currently seems to be recovering, mostly due to the guy she's with right now, who is willing to help her make better habits. We grew up in a hoarder home, like the TV show. She and I are the most normal out of the 4 kids our parents had. I learned how to clean up after myself by joining a minimalist Christian cult after high school. It's a long story. Our brother lives in his car, and our sister lives in an adult foster home. You never know why people are faffed up. It's not your job to help them, and it's okay to leave. But I think her guy is so good because he had a terrible childhood too, so he gets it. When I was almost 18, I joined a group that was calling itself the JCs, short for Jesus Christians. Now, they are known on the internet as Avid, a voice in the desert. They started in Australia in the 80s and are characterized by small nomadic teams around the world that spend their days proselytizing their literature and asking for donations. The funds go towards their RV lifestyle and their good works in countries like Kenya and India. I spent 3 years officially a member and was in touch for many years after, even to the point of marrying an ex-member. Look at my other comments and you will see how well that went. I divorced him after 4 years and moved back to my home state. After years of school and therapy, I am a successful cancer nurse with a loving long-term partner and my very own, clean and tidy house. I think there's also disorders and mental illnesses and stuff that can cause behavior like this too. I used to always be super clean, but after bad relationship and a drug problem that took several years to shake, I've been slowly building my self-confidence back up. And it's like I'll be totally oblivious to myself falling into gross habits or letting my house turn into a total pigsty. It's like I can see it, but I'm not registering it for some reason until one day I open the door and I'm like, dude, WHAT the hell have I done? It's like suddenly, switch will flip, and I'll be scolding myself like, you are one disgusting head. Why would you let it get this bad? Then again, maybe that's one reason why I have self-esteem problems, is how hard I'll crash onto myself for slipping up. I've been diagnosed with ADHD and an anxiety disorder, and I'm not properly medicated for either, so I think part of my problem is I'm so focused on panicking over everything that could go wrong in my life, or focusing on drowning out problems that are making me panic with escapism, that I can't see it sometimes until it's too late. I end up going on a major cleaning spree though. I've been trying to curb that behavior and remind me to always do once-overs 2 times a week or so. 10 minutes of cleaning twice a week to save me about half a day and feeling terrible about myself. I would go to her house every now and then and clean for hours, hardly making progress because the mess was that enormous, just so her kids could have some kind of space to sit or sleep that wasn't on trash. It was horrendous. I remember cleaning for like 9 hours one day. I did like 10 loads of laundry, hauled away like 16 bags of garbage, did 4 dishwashers full of dishes, and still had an easy solid week's worth of laundry left. And that's just what it took to find the nasty stained carpet underneath. One trash bag was primarily poop I cleaned up from the puppy that lived there, and there was always a new puppy after one didn't work out for whatever reason. I'm late to the party, but there was a guy in my social circle that I had crazy Yule tension with. Nothing happened for the longest time. Then one day, we bumped into each other in the city, had a few drinks. The tension was unbearable, and we went back to his place. And aside, I'd never had that kind of casual before. I'm the sort of person that needs to be in a relationship. But the chemistry with him was so intense, he was an exception. So we get to his place, tearing off each other's clothes. He lies me down on the bed, pulls my panties off, and sees my vagina for the first time. Want to know what he fucking said? He breathlessly said, "Oh my God. You look like a little girl. You're perfect." WHAT the fav. I didn't know what to say except wait, and sort of pushed him away from me. He was confused. I wasn't about to explain. I called a cab home and it was exceptionally awkward. They are always pushing and blurring the boundary, going always creepier but never reaching the illegal. It's always smaller looking girls, wearing schoolgirl uniforms and childish clothes. That's not okay, even if they are 20, 'cause the men watching it are attracted to the young look, 17 to 18-year-old look. But depending on the girl, she may even look younger. It's borderline CP, and no one can change my mind. As I said, no one can change my mind. My own mother couldn't if she tried. Maybe for you, if you're not sick in the head, that type of content is just women with a cutesy aesthetic and colorful outfits. But for a lot of those who watch that content, it's a specific and very creepy interest. They watch it and think how hot it is that the girl looks so young. If the incentive wasn't the youth and childish appearance, teen wouldn't be a category. Men would just watch whatever, and if the woman happens to look young, they won't care. But no, it's a category, and people willingly look up specifically content with girls who look young. Maybe you're too normal to realize it, which believe me is good. But some men actually are attracted to kids. I remember when that 46-year-old who was hitting on me was delighted when I told him I was 17 at the time. He was even happier than when first came to talk to me without knowing my age. And a 24-year-old teacher tried to groom me when I was 11, so I know those kinda disgusting creatures. And no, again, I disagree. Because it doesn't have children doesn't mean it's harmless. I don't believe that at all. Let's put it in perspective. We all agree zoophilia is wrong, Hope? Do you think drawn zoophilia is okay and not disturbing? 'Cause it certainly doesn't hurt real animals. It's still disturbing 'cause you know the person who watches it is a bad day away from actually attacking a poor animal and realizing their fantasy. Same for teen content. Not saying all those who watch it are pedos, but probably a lot of them are more into very young girl than they'd like to admit. I'm dying on this hill. It reminds me of a post I saw in 2020. The woman's boyfriend was beating her. He punched her in the stomach, so her friend gave her a place to stay. She left the friend's place and took her kid to be with him within a week or so. It was a post made from the friend's perspective. I could go on, but I know it's offensive. As a woman, I've seen some in real life that makes everything I hear on TV about it taking 15 times for the average abused person to leave roll my eyes. That's how gross the crap I've seen is. I have been grabbed by my neck until I passed out and dropped on the floor. This is what I have to say. Once kids are involved, I'm sorry if you have a job and you're okay with your children watching this. It's more, I'm abused. You're a sick nutcase, and we can't keep saying, oh poor you. Of course, the vast majority of cases are genuine. But boy, have I met people with some gross addictions. Much more gross than actual drugs. For people with BPD and narcissism, these kind of relationships are a sport. Briefly dated a girl who never cleaned her adult toys. It was something I missed the first few times we were together due to lighting, but once I did, it was all I could do to not retch. I played it off like the batteries had died in it. Afterwards, I took a peek at the rest of her collection, and they were all the same, coated in crustiness. It wasn't a missed spot here or there either. Had residue peeling and flaking off in big chunks, looking like the walls in an abandoned house. As far as I could tell, she wasn't an otherwise dirty person either. Her place was well kept and clean, and every time we were together it was clear she had either just taken a shower, or we would take one together as part of our pregame. Then again, I have anosmia and can't smell most things, so maybe she stank to hell, and I just couldn't tell. Clean your toys, people. Never dabbled too much with toys, but a girl I was seeing had what looked like a sleeve that only went 3/4 around, but used it in tandem with her hand to give me a handy. It was textured and vibrated, and boy did it elevate. She always cleaned it afterwards. Had another girl who preferred rubbing it out through my underwear, so we bought some tidy whities that could just be bleached and washed till they were needed again. When we split, I was gonna take them, as they were in my drawer at her place, but she didn't let me because she paid for them, so she said they were hers. I pray to God she didn't try to use them on the next dude. My ex used to say, constantly, that she wanted to be inside my skin. It was her way of saying she desired me, but it was fucking weird and off-putting, so I asked her to stop, and she couldn't understand what was so uncomfortable about what she was saying. Pretty soon after that, I went on a week-long work trip, and 3 days into it, she called and told me the whole time I've been gone, she wanted to cheat on me. Then she asked me if she could see other people while I'm gone. I broke up with her pretty much instantaneously. If only it were that easy to spot. My ex and I bonded because we had similar childhood trauma. However, I can say what she went through was far more traumatizing. So when her issues would come out, I'd identify them as the trauma, and I'd choose to be patient and understanding, even if I should have allowed myself to be angry or upset. I always thought you needed to give everything to your partner, every fiber of your being, every drop of emotion you can muster, and share in their misery. I wasn't even aware there was a line. And also, how damaging it can be when your partner can't reciprocate that level of emotional commitment. The level of care I had for her was unsustainable. I fucking drove 12 hours in the same day to support her while she presented her research at the conclusion of an 8-week lab internship. Even though I was completely emotionally drained, and we had a huge argument about how my feelings were in the way of her focus and she rather I not show up. I fucking showed up anyway and was an excellent boyfriend through all that. Then a couple weeks later I'm having a breakthrough in my career, and I wanted to show her a demonstration of the skills I learned, but she couldn't be bothered. She wouldn't even entertain it. So I called her out and suddenly it's okay, fine. You can show me, which was insult to injury, so I left it at, nah. I shouldn't have to beg you to be supportive of me. It got to the point where I would mentally and emotionally implode every couple months and have to take space from her. And even that was unacceptable. She just didn't understand why I needed it. I had absolutely nothing to give at times when I actually needed to be super boyfriend. Like when she left her home and family for the first time for that 8-week internship, or when her grandmother died, or when her parents abused her, or when she was going through a self-harm binge. I was tired and depressed every day. I've never been with someone so broken, narcissistic, and delusional before in my life. My ex flat out accused me of fucking my cousin because one day my cousin happened to be in town and we met up and we gave each other a huge hug because her and I grew up together and survived some pretty horrific abuse. And we were our only support for each other, so we of course bonded deeply because of that connection. And at the time this took place, I had not seen this cousin in over 10 years because she moved to the other side of the country, so we both of course missed each other since we had always been so close. And bonds formed under pressure like that are really strong. My girlfriend pulled me aside and started chewing me out, saying I hugged her too long, at which point I just said I'm not having this discussion. Feel free to leave if you don't like it. The next day, she accused me, publicly might add, of fucking my cousin because she found my cousin in my bed, completely ignoring the fact that I literally told my girlfriend my cousin was staying with me and that I was giving her my room and I would be sleeping on the couch. I was fucking fuming. She was jealous of me spending time with my sister and implied our relationship wasn't normal. I was so grossed out by the implication. Dumped her the best day. My dad's second wife did this. About me and my dad. All because I went with him to the store. We got back, and I was greeted with the "have fun with daddy?" She said it with a squint in her eyes and a sharpness in her voice. But my preteen brain didn't process the meaning. I went on with my business as usual. And from the next room, I heard an argument break out. My dad came in a few minutes later and told my brother and I that we were leaving with him. In the truck, my brother and I pressed him about why they fought. He didn't want to say it at first, but he finally admitted it was over her comment and what she meant by it. I was wally abused when I was young, not by my dad, although he was abusive in other ways, so I immediately felt sick. For months I kept my distance from him, because I was terrified that people would think the way his wife did. I'd like to say that he left her for that, and didn't go on to marry more winners after she booted him out, but I can't. My aunt, mom's brother's wife, told the same thing to my mom before she got married to my uncle. You spend too much time together and are too close. It's not normal. I'm going to break you two apart. And she did, by telling a ton of lies about my mom to everyone. And my uncle believed it all. This happened over 30 years ago, and mom still grieves to this day. I moved almost right next to my uncle and aunt actually 2 years ago and visited them a few times over that period of time because I wanted to be polite and not cause any more issues. The last time I went, they got both drunk and tried to feed me super far out stories about my mom and grandparents and great-grandparents hiding millions of euros worth of Jewish money and jewelry, and not sharing any with them. We are all quite ordinary people, actually rather poor, but because we have Jewish blood, hey, we must be hiding wealth somewhere. They must not be quite right in the head. I just sat there with the wine glass and quietly listened when they rambled on and on about it for hours. I am absolutely 200% sure we don't have any riches and have never had. I told my mom and now she's mad as hell. Obviously I never dated either my uncle or aunt, but I dumped them anyway after this. I was in an abusive relationship like that for a year and a half. Even tried to stab me once. I ended up getting arrested for assault after I called the cops for the second time in 2 weeks when she was in a benzo rage. She learned from the first time when they kept asking her if I'd hit her and if she was safe, and told them I hit her the moment they walked in. Never mind that I'm 6'1" and a former bodybuilder, and she didn't have a mark on her, or that she was ossified drunk and high on benzos and opiates, or that I had hid with my parents until the cops came to avoid this exact situation. Fucking pigs cuffed me and brought me out of my parents' house where we were staying after the baby, and left that psycho there for my parents to deal with. The only reason I didn't go to prison and my daughter wasn't forced to live her life with her junkie psycho trailer trash mother is because she was dumb enough to admit she lied to get custody back via text. That is the only thing that saved my. I ended up keeping full custody of my daughter, and she has had little contact with her mom for years. So yeah, firm line in the sand I put out there to anyone I dated before I got married. First time you put your hands on me or are verbally abusive, I'm out. No conversations, no apologies. Fuck you, I'm out. On top of how miserable it is being stuck in a relationship with someone like that, the courts and police are stacked so heavily against men in these cases that it would be stupid to take the chance. Oh, and just a real quick faff the police. A cab. We were in one of many fights, and I told him I needed space, so we hadn't talked in maybe a day. I get a text from a random number saying it was his sister and that he was in the hospital after a bad work accident. I ask which hospital, knowing that it is him texting me using a number app, lying about being injured, but you never know. Maybe it's real. She tells me the name of the hospital and then sends me a picture of just his legs, which are bruised, but they look like how his legs always looked. And then she says, this is the last picture they took of him before he was life-flighted to the hospital. She said he had severe head trauma, a cracked skull, and his back was likely broken in several places. So, I called the hospital and asked if they had any patients by his name. They said no. Asked if anyone was life-flighted in the last few hours. They said no, blocked the number and went to sleep. A few days later I got a text from another random number claiming to be his brother. He sends me a selfie of him in a hospital gown in an exam room at a doctor's office. He looked totally normal. No cracked skull or broken back. And it was cute, because the room was ocean-themed with crabs and fish on the walls. Anyway, the text said he was in the ICU, and he had just woken up from a coma. Again, I ask which hospital and the brother refuses to tell me, saying he'll be released within the hour, so there's no point in a visit. I know it makes me sound like a bad person for not believing him, but this man lied to me on several occasions. Told me he'd been shot, stabbed, poisoned. Also, his wife passed away, and he told me two very different stories about how she died, which led me to believe he might have had something to do with it. So many red flags, and my mentally ill self was naive and lonely at that time in my life. Granted, this was a breaking point for me, and I dove headfirst into therapy and never looked back. He showed me, with excitement, a box of things he'd been collecting from me without my knowledge. This included strands of my hair taped up neatly, bobby pins and hairpins I had in from prom, my fingerprints and saliva sample that he took out of the trash from our forensics class experiments. He thought this was a romantic gesture or something, but it just made me really realize how creepy and obsessive he is. He was also very controlling and got jealous, mad at me for hanging out with my sister, or spending time on my laptop or with my dog. And he also admitted to me that he stalked my FB interests to pretend he knew and liked what I liked, researching the games I played and music I listened to so he could bring it up in conversation. Total psycho. I was in an abusive relationship for 2 years, and my ex kept insisting I had too many books. He insisted I never read any of them, and I finally caved and told him I'd donate the ones I wasn't interested in anymore and reduce everything to one bookshelf. 1 month later, I have my lone bookshelf neatly organized and one stack of books in my desk. He kept asking if I would get rid of the bookshelf, and I told him no. We'd agreed previously multiple times one bookshelf was reasonable for the townhouse. Jerk revealed to me he hated me reading and having books because it made him feel stupid, and he wanted me to stop reading so much. Yeah, that really pissed me off. Broke up with him not long after that. When I was 16, I was grieving over the loss of my dad, who took his life when I was 11. 5 years is not that long in terms of grief for a kid. The depression I had at the time also prolonged it. Dated a guy from school who not only knew about this, but later told me when he broke up with me that he pretended to care so he could sleep with me. The same guy went on a tangent about how I needed to get over it because he stopped grieving 3 months after his grandma died when he was 6, and it's not normal to grieve longer than that. I wasn't even hurt when he broke up with me. Told him it was better that he never speak to me again. I laugh about it now, but at the time I was absolutely appalled and shocked that he would admit that. A friend of mine still talks to him, and apparently he hasn't changed. Apologies ahead of time for oversharing when no one asked. It wasn't my ex, but my ex's best friend was so cruel to me when my father died when I was 17. My ex and her friend were 16. The day after he died, I went to a school event. I would have rather done anything than be at home alone. My ex's boyfriend Fife was so mad that my ex was spending time with me instead of her, even though my dad had literally just died and my ex was with me when I found out. It was about 30 minutes after I asked her to prom. She was complaining to everyone, illy, that I was an attention seeker who was milking this tragedy for all it was worth. I was using it to make people like me more. I was being unfairly demanding, all kinds of. Meanwhile, I was actually being incredibly stoic and trying to not interact with anyone but my ex. I felt so bad for bringing other people down. And, I will repeat, this was less than 24 hours since my father had died. This was on top of a gradual escalation of her being annoyed at our relationship. She was always pissed at my ex for choosing me over her, which was not how that worked. I always felt like my ex cared more about her friendship with that girl than she did about our relationship. So, there's that. We ended up having a huge blow-up fight in the middle of an Olive Garden lol. It was mostly because this friend had a crush on my ex, which neither of us found out about until years later. I used to be pretty upset that my ex stayed friends with this girl, even though she saw how mean she was to me. But they had a longer history than me and my ex, so I kind of get it. We've all been on good terms for several years. We all ended up working at the same place after high school, and my ex is my best friend now, and she's apologized to me several times. But man, that era was rough. I didn't think anyone could be that mean towards someone going through such grief. But apparently it's more common than I thought. This best friend also happened to be my ex, but it's not really relevant. LGBT dating in a small high school just means you all date the same people. I think she partially dated me because she knew my ex or her boyfriend Fife had a crush on me, and it was her weird way at getting back at my ex for not dating her, or something? I don't know. I've spent way too many years of my life to psychoanalyze this girl, and frankly, it's not that relevant to my life anymore.